What happens when a soft woman returns to the home where she has been considered unnecessary her entire life? You won't believe what she found between the old sheets and who had been there all along. What happened next changed everything she knew about her family forever. Clara stood at the stove, as she had done all her life, slightly to one side, so as not to get in anyone's way. The smell of baked pumpkin and dill wafted through the kitchen, trying to warm this gray nest where no one had lived for a long time, only waiting for someone to get tired first. She cut the bread into thin slices, trying not to make any noise, although no one else in the house was breathing now. The stove crackled, as if trying to say a word for someone. The tablecloth, old, with twisted rings from cups, lay as it had when her mother was alive. Even the crumbs were almost the same. Clara put a spoon in the soup, sat down at the empty table, and said aloud, "Here you go. Eat, Mom." The silence did not waver. Not even the old floorboards creaked under her feet. There was no smell of perfume, no voice, only her own breath. She knew her mother would not come. She knew it with her whole body, with everything except her hands, because her hands continued to cook, just as they had cooked for her when she was little, when her mother still remembered her name and didn't confuse her with her sister or call her that one, when they didn't divide the refrigerator into mine and don't touch, when there was laughter, and when there were screams. The soup began to cool. Clara struggled to her feet, cleared the plate, and didn't even notice that she had wiped the tears from her cheeks along with the splashes. The fatigue was not physical. It was bone deep, the kind that doesn't sleep with you, but breathes inside you. Then she went into the living room, not because she wanted to, but because the house was hers now, and every creak of the floor was like a stranger's voice. "You're late." Or worse, "Why did you even come?" The pictures on the walls were the same, black and white in cheap frames. It was as if everything had frozen in time, and only Clara had grown old. A photograph of her parents stood in the corner, by the wardrobe. She picked it up and ran her finger across the glass. "Hello," she said quietly. And then, as if on cue, a voice came through the door. Sharp, tired, as if it had been saved especially for this moment. "Are you messing with that junk again?" We agreed. "You clean up the house and then you leave." It was her brother's voice. Matteo, he didn't even come in. He knew she would hear him anyway. Clara pressed her lips together. She put the photograph back in its place. She let it go. Silently. She didn't answer. Why? He only hears himself anyway. It had always been like this, first as a child, when he hid candy from her. Then, when he took their mother away to talk behind closed doors. And now, he was simply taking everything away. The house, her memories, and her right to regret. Clara stepped out into the hallway. Matteo was standing there, leaning on the railing and chewing gum, as if he had returned not to a funeral, but to recess. "I just wanted," she began. He didn't let her finish. "You always just wanted something. Only now it's too late." She nodded, not out of agreement, but out of exhaustion. She returned to the kitchen. She sat down. She put the kettle on. And then she noticed a piece of paper on the windowsill, between a jar of peas and a faded mug. It had been folded carelessly, as if someone had been in a hurry. Clara picked it up. She unfolded it. There were only a few words. The handwriting was not hers, or her mother's. It wasn't her brother's either. But it was alive. And from those words, Clara understood. She was not alone here. And maybe she never had been. What happened next changed everything. You won't want to miss how it unfolded. "You've always been too soft. That's why they walk all over you," he said, as if discussing the weather. "No emotion, No anger, just a statement of fact, as if he were reading the label on a packet of salt. Clara stood leaning against the sink. The piece of paper with the note lay next to her, neatly folded back into the envelope. Inside, something rang, barely audible. Not fear. No. Something else. Doubt, perhaps. Or the truth you don't want to hear from someone who has looked away their whole life. Matteo didn't say it to her face. He said it as he left, in the doorway, with his bag on his shoulder, his keys in his pocket, and that eternal habit of throwing words around so that they cut, even when they weren't sharp. Clara didn't turn around. Only her lips trembled, as if they wanted to say something, and couldn't find the meaning. She turned off the tap, turned to the table, sat down. The note was still lying in front of her. The paper was old, yellow, like a leaf in September. The handwriting was uneven, pressed down, as if written by someone who wasn't used to a pen, but really wanted to be read. I can hear you walking. Don't be afraid. I've been waiting for you for a long time. She read it again, and again. The lines didn't change, but with each reading, the feeling grew that this was not a joke, not a phrase someone had forgotten. Someone really knew she was coming, knew how she walked, how she was silent. Soft, she whispered. Soft, that means. And immediately, an old scene flashed in her mind. She was about 7 years old. Her mother placed a plate of semolina in front of her. The whole family had already eaten. Her father is reading the newspaper. Matteo is playing with his toy car. And she is sitting on a kitchen stool, silently poking at her porridge with a spoon. Her mother sighs. You're always like this. Spineless. Eat. And Clara eats. Slowly, not because she is hungry, but because she does not want to hear another sentence like that. She stands up, takes a cup, an old one with a rim painted with cherries, and suddenly notices that the handle is cracked. Almost all the way, it has been held together by a thread, like everything else in this house. Clara wanted to put the cup back in its place, but her hand trembled, and it hit the tabletop with a dull thud. The crack spread. Quickly, the cherries on the ceramic looked like a wound. A little more, and it will leave this house too, she muttered, like everything else. She sat down again. The house seemed too quiet. Not like peace, but like waiting, as if someone hadn't left, just hidden, or lurking, or watching. Clara wasn't afraid, but she felt the skin on her back tense, as if from a gaze. The note lay right in front of her. Simple words, but not empty ones, unlike most of the words that had been thrown at her throughout her life. She stood up and walked down the hallway, barefoot, carefully, as if she didn't want to wake anyone. She looked at the photo of her parents again. Her mother was looking straight ahead. Her father, as always, was looking slightly to the side. Clara's face in the mirror was between them, neither here nor there. She didn't know who had left the note, but she knew for sure. It wasn't her brother. It wasn't her mother. And everything she knew about the house no longer mattered. In the morning, the house smelled of damp wood and boiled milk. This happened sometimes. The old stove, the old house, everything in a circle. Clara woke up, not immediately realizing where she was. Then she heard the floor creak behind the door and remembered. Her mother had died. Her mother had died. And now she was here alone. Or almost alone. The house was not cozy. It was insistent, as if it were testing her. Would she be able to endure it as she had in her childhood? The kitchen windows were fogged up. Clara wiped the moisture away with her palm and immediately saw herself. Her face was a little tired, with shadows of sleep under her eyes. Her hair was pulled back with a rubber band, As always, she was wearing an old blouse that her mother had given her. It was a faded lilac color, the same as the curtains that had been hanging on nails since the 60s. The kettle was boiling on the stove, and the same phrases were running through her head. "You're weak. You're spineless. You just want people to feel sorry for you." As if loving her was something shameful, as if caring was a service that had to be earned. There were 2 cups on the table. One was cracked, the other had, "To the best mom" written on it. The handle had long since fallen off, but Clara didn't throw it away, not because she was poor, but because throwing away something that belonged to her mother seemed like betrayal, although her mother hadn't cared about those mugs for 20 years. Once there was laughter here, then whispers, then only silence. And Matteo, always coming to check, as if she could never manage on her own, even though he was the one who ran away first. He came yesterday, just to make sure that Clara didn't get into anything she shouldn't. That's what he said. Just like that, as if the house were a bank vault. "You don't understand how much this costs," he said then, without even taking off his shoes. "There's the land, the buildings, the barn. It's all an asset. Don't feel like you own the place, okay?" Clara said nothing then. She just realized that he still considered her superfluous. It was as if she had lost her way in a strange forest, even though she had spent her entire childhood within these walls. Today he left. He said he would be back in a couple of days with a notary. He said it in a tone that implied she should vacuum the entire house and sign the waiver by then. He didn't even ask how she was. He didn't ask if she had slept or eaten. Instead, he asked, "Did you find the keys to the basement?" And when she said no, he snorted. The basement. Always the basement. Once it was closed, then it was locked. Then, you can't go in there. There are nails. And then no one talked about it at all. And now, it's important. Again. Clara felt that she wouldn't find the keys. But maybe the basement would find her. She got up and went to her mother's old room. It smelled of lavender and medicine. The bed was neat, as if her mother had gone out for a walk. On the bedside table was a clock that hadn't ticked for a long time. There was a photograph of her and Matteo when they were very young. She was smiling. He wasn't. On the floor was a box of letters. Clara bent down and rummaged through them. Bills, receipts, shopping lists. No diaries, no notes. Nothing alive. Except for one thing. A piece of cardboard. Small, almost cut off. And on the back was an inscription in her childish handwriting. "If you find this, I love you." She didn't even remember when she had written it. Maybe she had hidden it from her brother once. Maybe she just wanted someone to find it. But no one did, until she did. She put the cardboard in her pocket. She sat down on the edge of the bed. And then she heard it. A click. Not in the house, inside her. As if someone had closed the door, or opened it. She stood up, and went into the hallway. She approached the door to the basement as if she were approaching a person she hadn't spoken to in 30 years. She pressed the handle. It wouldn't turn. The lock was old, brass, darkened, but still working. It seemed to be looking at her, as if it was choosing when to let her in and when not to. "Not today, then," she muttered. And she went back to the kitchen. Everything was as it had been in the morning. The cups, the kettle, the stove. But the air was different. It was as if someone had been there while she was walking around the house. Clara went to the window and threw it open. Fresh air rushed into her face, smelling of wet earth and stove smoke. A dog barked in the distance. Somewhere far away behind the fence, a branch moved. One. The rest stood still. Too still. She wasn't afraid. She used to be afraid. Now she just wanted to understand. What was wrong here? And then, again, the piece of paper on the same windowsill, where there was nothing left but a broken plate. New, neatly folded. The handwriting was the same, slightly shaky, with heavy pressure, as if written by someone in a hurry, or someone who really wanted to be heard. She unfolded it. Only 4 words. Do you remember the ladder? The ladder, she thought. The one leading to the attic, or the one leading down to the basement before it was blocked up. Number something else. It wasn't about wood and boards. It was about the evening when she hid there so she wouldn't hear her mother screaming at her father. When she was 10 years old. Or 12. When she sat in the corner, hugging her knees, watching the mice, and praying that no one would find her. She fell asleep then. And in the morning she woke up, and there was bread lying next to her, and a handkerchief. Blue. Not hers, not her mother's. Since then, she decided it was a dream, or that her mother had taken pity on her, although her mother didn't feel sorry. Her mother said, "Wanting something doesn't mean you have to have it." And she didn't hug her. Clara stood there with the note in her hand, and felt that everything she had thought was a figment of her imagination had lived in this house longer than she had. She went up to the attic, just like that, without a purpose. The attic smelled of dust and old paint. There was a creaking and shaking under her feet. There were boxes, wicker baskets, and a chair, a child's chair. Small, as if someone had come here to read. On the chair was a book. Open, dust-free. There was a bookmark on the page, a dried clover. Clara crouched down, quietly. She sat as if she were in church. She opened the book. It was a collection of short stories. Old. Inside was a note written in pencil. "I knew you would forget, but I won't." She couldn't breathe. For several seconds, her whole body was tense. Her hands were shaking. Her heart seemed to remember that once upon a time it had not only been painful, but also warm. She stood up. She closed the book, and suddenly, behind her, a creak. The same one. The floorboard, at the entrance to the attic. Clara turned around. No one was there. But there was air. There was a smell, like when she was a child. Dust and honey. A smell that had long since disappeared. She went downstairs, slowly, not out of fear, out of caution. Everything in the kitchen was in its place, except for one thing. The key. It was lying on the tablecloth, old, iron, familiar. From the basement. Clara looked at the key. It wasn't new. It was the same one that had once lain in her mother's drawer, under handkerchiefs and dried soap bars. It had disappeared at some point, and now it was back. "Of course," she muttered. It came back on its own. Polite. She didn't pick it up right away. She sat there. She poured herself some tea. It was cold. Then she sat down again. The key lay there like a reproach, like a challenge, like a question that had to be asked. "Are you ready to find out what you've been missing your whole life?" She thought maybe her brother had planted it there, but Matteo was too straightforward for such tricks. If he wanted to scare her, he would have just said, "Get out." But Rosworfer, that wasn't him, or her mother. It was home, from the house itself. She took the key. A cheerful metallic ring seemed to run through her veins. She went out into the hallway. She approached the door. The lock creaked, slowly, like an old man getting out of bed. Behind the door was darkness. Thick, dense. The kind you don't want to look at because suddenly someone is looking back at you. Clara reached for the light switch, and then she stopped. What if someone was there? What if someone had been there all this time? Or worse, what if there was no one there, and everything she felt was just her imagination? And she was, just like when she was a child, too impressionable. And her brother was right. Soft, she whispered. Too soft to carry the truth. She returned to the kitchen. She sat down. She drank her tea. It was awful. She took another mug. She remembered her mother saying that the basement had been bricked up because it was drafty. But when she was a child, she had seen her father coming out of there with tools, and once with a bottle. And then, as a teenager, she tried to go down there. But the door was locked, and her mother said, "There's only junk in there. Don't touch the past if you want to sleep peacefully." And so she didn't touch it, but she still couldn't sleep peacefully. Clara looked out the window. Twilight, blue air. Everything was just like that evening when she hid on the stairs. Her heart was pounding, not from fear, from being tired of other people's secrets, from being told her whole life, "You mustn't know." And now she knew she had to. She walked over to the door. Her hand was shaking. "This is the last time," she said aloud. "One question. One answer." And she put her hand on the doorknob. She went downstairs. Not like going down to the basement, like going inside herself. Step by step, each one like a decision. The creaking of the wood, the dust on her socks. The walls were close, the air thick. Downstairs there was no sound, no light. But something was waiting. A light bulb hung from a wire. She pulled it. The light flickered and came on. The basement was not scary, just alive. As if no one had touched it, but it remembered everything. Shelves, a table, an old box, newspapers, and in the corner, a cage, empty, dusty, and a chair, a child's chair. Clara moved closer. On the table was a newspaper clipping, rolled up. Underneath it was an album. She opened it. Photographs. Her, but not from childhood, not the ones kept in the house. But recent ones. Her in a shop. Her at a bus stop. Her outside a hospital. Taken from a distance. Clara recoiled. Number one, it was impossible. Who? Why? And then she heard it. A sound above her head. A creak. A step. One. Clara froze. Then she went upstairs, not running, as if she knew she mustn't hurry. She had to understand. The kitchen was empty. She went out into the hallway. "Mateo?" she called. "Are you home?" Silence. No answer. Only the door. The front door. It was open. A little. Slightly ajar, as if someone had just. And then, a voice. Behind her. Calm. Not threatening. But knowing. "I knew you'd find it." Clara turned around and froze. It wasn't her brother. It wasn't her father. It wasn't the man she remembered. But he knew her. Too well. "Who are you?" He didn't answer, just nodded toward the basement. "That's not everything, but it's a start." Clara felt she was at a crossroads. Either she asked questions, or she started pretending again. She chose questions. "Why were you following me?" He didn't blink. "I wasn't following you. I was protecting it. Everything you were afraid of, everything you forgot, everything you threw away. I stayed." She felt a chill run down her spine again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from the truth. The house wasn't empty. It never had been. He was just there with her. Silent. Watching. Waiting. She opened the door not to the basement, but to her own memory. And there was no turning back. In the next chapter, someone will appear who will give her a mirror, but will not forgive her mistakes. He stood leaning against the doorframe, as if he had just stopped by to check on his neighbors. No fear, no strangeness, just a gaze too direct to be accidental. His face was familiar, like from an old photograph, but older. His voice was calm. His clothes were simple. And the name he gave her, Thomas, meant nothing to her. "Did you know my mother?" Clara asked. He nodded. "And your father. And you, Clara. You were just too young to remember." She wanted to back away, find a phone, the police, her brother, anyone. But it all seemed ridiculous, given that he knew for sure that she had found the note, and how she walked, and where the stairs were. "I thought it was all my imagination," she said quietly. He sat down at the table. "You made it up, and then it became true." Clara looked at him as if she was afraid he would disappear if she blinked. He wasn't threatening, but there was something more to him than just a human being. Not in a mystical sense, more like someone who had been through too much, and now spoke little, but heard everything. "Who are you?" she asked again. He didn't answer. He just took a small piece of paper out of his pocket. It was yellowed and old. "This is yours. You wrote it when you were 10. You hid it in your pillow." She took it and read it. Tears welled up immediately. "If you ever find me, don't let me become like Mom." Clara turned away, not because she was ashamed, because it hurt. He poured her some tea, without a word. He found the cup himself and turned on the stove. He knew where everything was, and he didn't explain anything. "Why didn't you come sooner?" He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "You weren't ready to see. You saw what you were allowed to see." They sat in silence, together. And for the first time in many years, she didn't feel alone. He didn't ask any questions. He didn't feel sorry for her. He was just there, and that was enough. "Thomas, did you live here?" "Not exactly. I stayed, when everyone left." And she understood. He wasn't a ghost. He was a witness, and perhaps the only one who remembered her, not as soft, useless, or weak, but as she really was. He stood up. "You'll need to remember, Clara, but not right away, and not everything." "I'm afraid," she said honestly. "I'll be here," he replied. He left as quietly as he had appeared, but the air in the house was different. It was as if someone had finally said, "You have the right not to be strong, and still be yourself." In the morning, Clara woke up without an alarm clock, but not out of fear. Her body simply decided it was time. The pillow smelled of old lavender, and something else. That smell you get when someone is in the house, even if you can't see them. The kitchen was empty, but the mug on the table was warm. She touched it and smiled for the first time in a long time. Thomas hadn't left. He was somewhere nearby, and while she wasn't ready to know how, why, or where, he wasn't a stranger. The day passed in a strange equilibrium. She washed the floors, sorted through books, and peeled old wallpaper from the corner of the bedroom. In an old chest of drawers, she found a note from her mother, a note that wasn't written by her. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but it was tucked between photos of their family. Don't blame her. No one taught her how to love either. Clara sat down on the floor, staring at the piece of paper. It contained her entire mother. Her whole life lived in resentment and stubbornness. Not anger, fear. Not cruelty, incompetence. Then there was a knock at the door. A normal daytime knock. She opened it. It was Thomas. "I thought you might need some eggs. The chicken laid some." He was holding an old wicker basket in his hands. The eggs were warm, as if they had just come from under the hen. She wanted to say something witty, but the words wouldn't come. She just took the basket. "Come in." He came in. He sat down by the window. He took off his shoes. It was as if he knew this house like the back of his hand. And she didn't ask any questions. In the evening, they drank tea, without talking. He told her about an old dog that had lived in this yard before the war, about a tree that her grandfather had planted, about how people used to gather in this house. "You know," he said, "your mother wasn't always like this." "I know," she said, "but I only remember the one who slammed doors." They laughed, not loudly, just the way adults laugh when they haven't allowed themselves to be happy for too long. The next morning, Clara went to the barn. It smelled of hay and mold. In the corner were old things. Among them was a children's album. Not hers, not Mateo's. The name inside was unfamiliar. Simon. And next to it was a caption. "Our beloved boy." The Thomas family. Clara sat down on the floor. She leafed through the pages. With each page, she felt something inside her change. Thomas wasn't just the man from the basement. He was part of something that had been torn from her family, erased, pushed away. In the album was a photo of her mother, younger, with a baby. Not her. Not Mateo. Clara clutched the pages. This was a family secret. Not a rumor. Not a guess. This was flesh and blood. But why had no one said anything? Why had her mother kept this in the shed instead of in her heart? In the evening, Thomas came again. She didn't open the door right away. Then she let him in. She put the album on the table. "Explain," she said, "or leave." He sat down. He sighed. He looked straight at her. "He was your brother. You're first. I thought I was the youngest. You're the third, Clara, but you were the first one they left behind." She didn't need the whole story. She knew that everything was different now. Her mother, her father, Mateo. They had all kept it inside, as if it were a shame. But it turned out that it wasn't about shame. It was about pain that had never been expressed, but had grown nonetheless. "Say it again," whispered Clara. Her lips barely obeyed her. Thomas's words still echoed in the room, but they bounced off the walls like bullets. "His name was Simon. He was your mother's son. And my brother's." Thomas didn't try to soften it. He spoke honestly, calmly, like someone who had already lived through the pain and could now name it. "Your mother was pregnant at 17. She gave birth to him in secret. He was given away. Her parents insisted. Then she married your father. Everything went according to plan." Clara sat on the chair, still, impossibly still. Her chest felt empty. Not pain, not fear. An abyss. "Did he die?" she asked. Thomas nodded. Slowly. "At 14. He got sick. He was adopted, then taken back. He was shuffled around foster homes. He spent his last months here, in this house. His mother found him. She tried to take him back." Clara shook her head. "And then?" Thomas looked at her, as if he wanted to be careful but couldn't. She couldn't. She already had Mateo. She already had a decent life. She sent him back. Temporarily. And he didn't come back. Not anywhere. Silence hung in the kitchen. Clara got up and went to the sink. Not because she needed to wash anything, just to move. To breathe. The water ran. Her hands were under the tap. But she felt nothing. Only thoughts. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because you were convenient, quiet, The kind who doesn't ask questions. That's why they kept you, and that's why they punished you. Then she went to the bedroom, her mother's bedroom. She opened the closet. Everything was still there, but now it was like a museum. Everything breathed lies. She took out the dress her mother was wearing in that photo, the one where she was hugging a child. But now she knew who it was. She looked for clues, letters, confessions, anything, and she found something. At the bottom of the drawer was an envelope, no stamp, no date. Inside was a piece of paper. "Simon, forgive me. I didn't know what to do. I was told it was the right thing to do, but that didn't make it right. I was afraid to love you, because I had already betrayed you." Signed, Mom. Clara sat down on the floor. Her whole body felt like it was filled with concrete. No tears, no hysterics, just clarity. Her mother knew how to write, just not to her. Her mother suffered, just silently. And now she was dead. There would be no more words, only fragments, only these letters from a stranger that were now hers. Thomas stood in the doorway. He didn't come in. That's all I knew, but maybe you'll find out more. Here, in this house. It speaks when you listen to it. Clara raised her head. "I hear it." He nodded. "Then get ready. The house hasn't told you everything yet." Now Clara knew everything. But knowledge is not a relief. It's a weight on her heart. And ahead of her are those who hid it, and those who don't want the truth to come out. The doorbell rang at noon. It was sharp, like a gunshot, even though the house was empty. Clara flinched. She wiped her hands on her apron. Why had she even put it on? A habit. From her mother. Always be prepared, even if there's no one there. She opened the door. Matteo, in a leather jacket. His smile was like a knife. "Well, hello. I see you're making yourself at home." She didn't answer. She just took a half step back. He came in on his own. "Where are the keys to the shed?" he asked, as if continuing yesterday's conversation. "What do you need them for?" "It's not up to you. This is still our house." The word "our" always sounded like mine to her, ever since she was a child. He walked around the kitchen, touching things. A mug, a clock, a book. He picked up the photo album, the very one. He opened it. He saw a picture of Simon. He froze. For a second. His jaw tensed. "Who's that?" "Our brother," said Clara. He closed the album. "Don't talk nonsense. He has your eyes." "I don't have any brothers." "You're here, and you're no gift." They sat there. She was silent. He talked. "Are you starting again? Looking? Digging?" "Mom died, and thank God. She endured everything. And you can't even live in this house for a week without drama?" "Did she endure it, or did she hide it?" Clara asked. He slammed his hand on the table. "Stop it. Just sign the papers, Clara. This house isn't for tears. It's real estate. Money. We're splitting it, and that's it." She went into her room and slammed the door. Everything inside was shaking. Her eyes were dry, but there was a lump in her throat. This house wasn't about money. It was about silence. About those who had been thrown out. About what couldn't be sold. She knew that if she signed, it would all be over. If she didn't, the war would begin. In the evening, he spoke again. "I spoke to the notary. We can draw up the refusal without you. But you'll ruin everything. Again. You always ruin everything. Ever since you were a child. Mom cried more because of you than because of me. She just didn't say anything." "Do you believe that?" Clara asked. "Or do you want to?" He didn't answer. At night, she sat by the window. The house breathed. The walls creaked. but not from age, from tension. Thomas was gone. He had disappeared just as he had arrived. She felt alone. Towards morning, there was a knock. She ran to the door. The threshold was empty. Only a note. In old handwriting. One word. Be careful. Clara sat in the dark. No light, no words, no meaning. Matteo had left. Before leaving, he slammed the door, not even in anger, just to close it, for good. He left a folder with papers on the table, with a note. Sign it and call me. The number was crossed out, left there as a mockery. She hadn't eaten anything since morning. The kettle boiled and cooled. The stove smoked and went out. She sat in her mother's chair, wrapped in an old blanket, not because of the cold, because she couldn't move. On the floor was a photo album, a double-page spread with Simon. He was looking at the camera in surprise, as if he couldn't believe someone was taking his picture. He looked as if he were saying, I was. I am. Why did you cross me out? Clara didn't get up until evening. She went to the shed on autopilot, like her mother used to go to the garden to come to her senses. The shed smelled of rotten wood and a sour past. There was a box in the corner. She lifted the lid. Inside were old notebooks, books, a broken frame, and a scarf. Blue. The same one someone had once left for her on the stairs when she was little. She took it, pressed it to her chest, and for the first time in many years, she cried. Not quietly, not nobly, like a person who has nothing left to lose. Later, she went into the bedroom, sat down on the floor, in front of the mirror. She looked at herself. She didn't see a woman, not a daughter, not even a sister. She saw an empty space that no one counted on, that no one chose, that was used as a substitute for other people's fears. The house shook. She heard every rustle, and in each one, she heard not a threat, but loneliness. She picked up the cup, the one with the crack. She clenched it. She didn't want to throw it away, but her hand trembled. The ceramic fell. It shattered, just like her. That night, the house didn't breathe. It lay in wait, as if it understood that everything was hanging by a thread. Clara lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The light from the street lamp filtered through the curtain, casting a spot on the wall that looked like a child's drawing, where the sun is always crooked. Her eyes didn't close once, not since evening, not during the night. But there were no more tears. Everything was dry, even inside. She remembered. She didn't want to, but her brain kept replaying the film. There she was, small, hiding under the table while her parents argued. There she was, sitting on a bench, waiting for her mother to pick her up from school. She didn't come. There she was, drinking tea with her father, who was silent all evening, and then said, "You're not like Matteo. You're weaker." And then she decided to keep quiet, not to get involved, to be convenient, at least not to get in the way. She remembered how, at 15, she wanted to run away. She packed her backpack and even made it to the bus stop. But she didn't leave, because she heard the same voice inside her head. "Who needs you there?" She returned, and kept quiet, all her life. Now her mother is dead. Her father has long been in the ground. Matteo is a stranger. And Thomas never showed up. He disappeared, like everything else that brought her even a shred of warmth. She stood up, went to the mirror. She sat down opposite. She looked for a long time, not at her hair, not at her wrinkles, but at her eyes. And she asked, "Clara, have you ever been yourself?" There was no answer, but suddenly, as if out of nowhere, she remembered a moment. Forgotten, suppressed. Simon. He was sitting by the stove, small, about 10 years old. He was looking at her. She held out a piece of candy to him. "Mom says you're my sister," he said. "Do you believe her?" He shrugged. "If you want, we can be." And they were. For 3 days, until they took him away. Clara pressed her palms to her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry I forgot everything. I'm sorry it was convenient for me. I'm sorry I didn't look for you." But suddenly, it wasn't a revelation. It wasn't a voice from heaven. Just peace. As if Simon had heard her, and he wasn't angry. Clara got up. She opened the window. It was cold, but it was easy. She knew the pain wouldn't go away, but now she wouldn't hide it. The morning was quiet. No creaking, no nightmares, just light. Cold, real light. Clara woke up on her own. No jolt. No thoughts of, "I have to." She just got up, went to the kitchen, made some tea, sat there. She drank. She looked out the window at the garden where plum trees once grew. Now there were only bare branches, but she suddenly realized they were alive. It just wasn't time yet. The folder with the documents was still on the table. Next to it was a note from her brother. "Don't forget. The notary is coming today." Clara picked up the pen. She opened it. She read everything. Silently, without trembling, and then she carefully put it back and signed it. Number, not out of spite, not out of principle, but because this house wasn't about money. It was about everyone who hadn't been heard, including her. She knew Matteo wouldn't forgive her. He might even get angry. But now it wasn't her responsibility. She didn't want to fight. She just didn't want to be silent anymore. In the afternoon, she went back down to the basement. It was light there. Not bright, but without fear. She went to the box where she found an old handkerchief, and she put the letter in it. Her letter. She had written it during the night. "Simon, I remember you. I hear you. And I won't give you my silence anymore. I will be your voice. I'm sorry I didn't do it sooner. I'm sorry I didn't know. I am your sister. Now, for real." The letter lay next to the others. She closed the lid and said, "That's it. Now it's over." When she stepped out onto the porch, she saw Thomas. He was standing there as always, calm, as if he had just been there. "Did you know you would do that?" he asked. Clara nodded. "Did you?" He smiled. "I knew you would remember who you are. Not a daughter. Not a sister. Just a person who no longer gives herself over to the silence of strangers." They sat there together, in silence. Then he left. But she was no longer afraid that he would disappear, because now she was here. Not as a shadow, but as a light. He came in the morning without ringing the doorbell. Too early for a visit, too late for apologies. Matteo stood in the doorway, as always, confident, irritated, with that eternal complaint in his voice, as if the world had let him down personally. "Where are the papers?" he asked immediately. "I'm not in the mood to beat around the bush." Clara didn't answer. She went into the kitchen. She put the kettle on, slowly, without fuss. He followed her. "What? Do I have to beg? Listen, I've been patient. I gave you time. But now you're holding everything up. The house is standing empty. We need money." She turned around, without anger. She looked him in the eyes. "How much did you take from this house?" she asked. He froze. "What?" I said. "How much did you take from here? When Mom was sick, when she was lying in her room and calling for you at night. Where were you?" "Don't start." "I came. I brought her medicine. I was busy too. I have a job. I have children. I have a life. And I have nothing, right? Silence. Clara moved closer. Her voice was steady, but it contained everything that had built up over the years. You were the first, the favorite. They trusted you. They counted on you. And me, they hid away. I was their weakness, their mistake, their soft spot. But you know what? I survived. Not because of you. In spite of you. Stop it, he said hoarsely. That's all in the past. No, it's here, in these walls, in these things, in my memory, and in Simon. He raised his head. Leave it. Don't. I have to. Because he was. Because his mother loved him. And betrayed him. Just like me. Only I'm left. And he's not. He sat down, exhausted. His shoulders slumped. I knew, he whispered. I've known for a long time. She said so when she was dying. Just one thing. I betrayed him. I didn't ask who. Because you didn't want to know, said Clara. As always, silence. Then he raised his head. And now what? She went to the closet. She took out a letter. She put it on the table. I'm leaving home, but not for you. For him. For Simon. Let at least something real remain within these walls. He nodded, without a word. She watched him get up. Leave. Not quickly. Not proudly. Just leave. He stopped at the door. You're not the same anymore. Finally, you've noticed, she replied. The door closed, without a slam. She gathered her things. Not much. Clothes, a teapot, a scarf, and the letter. The very same letter she had put in the basement drawer. Now it was with her. The house was behind her, but not as a loss, like a page that must be read, but cannot be reread endlessly. She returned to the house 3 days later, just for an hour, just to close everything, physically and mentally. Everything in the kitchen was the same, the curtains, the table, the cups. Only now she didn't look for meaning in it. She knew that the house didn't respond. It just preserved. The things you're afraid to remember yourself. She turned on the kettle, the same one that had heated water for all those years. And while it was boiling, she went to the window. The smell was the same. Grass, ash, an old drain pipe. But now the smell wasn't oppressive. It was a testimony. To time. To pain. To her. Clara sat down at the table. She placed 2 cups in front of her. One was intact. The other was glued together. The very one. She hadn't thrown it away. For him, she said aloud. But she didn't explain for whom. Maybe for Simon. Maybe for herself. The kettle whistled. She poured the water. She didn't add sugar. Now she knew how to drink it as it was. There was no loneliness in this silence. There was presence. Finally, the real thing. When she left, the door didn't slam. It just closed. If you know what it feels like to have felt like an outsider in your own family your whole life, write the word "heard" in the comments. Because sometimes one word is enough for someone to realize they're not alone. And if this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe. There are more truths like this that people don't talk about out loud.